In this episode, we are going to spend time on a part of support work that new learners sometimes underestimate because it does not look as dramatic as replacing a failed drive or troubleshooting a network outage. Good support teams do not only fix problems in the moment, they also leave behind clear records that explain what happened, what system was involved, what action was taken, what promise was made to the user, and what information should be saved so the same mistake does not happen again. That is why tickets, asset records, standard operating procedures, SOPs, service level agreements, SLAs, and knowledge articles matter so much in day-to-day operations. To a beginner, those items can seem like paperwork that slows real work down, but that view misses the point. They are part of the real work because they create consistency, improve handoffs, reduce confusion, support accountability, and turn one technician's effort into useful knowledge for the rest of the team and for the future version of that same team. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A support environment without solid documentation often feels chaotic even when the people in it are smart and hardworking. Problems reappear, but no one remembers exactly what was tried last time. A device is replaced, but the old record is incomplete, so the next technician has no idea whether the failure was part of a bigger pattern or just a one-time event. A user insists that an issue has been happening for months, and there is no reliable history to confirm or challenge that claim. Over time, this kind of weak record-keeping causes repeated effort, missed details, and avoidable delays. Strong documentation acts like organizational memory. It helps a team recognize trends, spot recurring failures, preserve context during shift changes, and keep support quality from depending entirely on who happens to be on duty that day. In a healthy operation, good records do not exist to satisfy bureaucracy alone. They exist so work can continue smoothly, decisions can be understood later, and support can become more stable instead of starting over from zero with every new issue. A good ticket is more than a placeholder saying that something went wrong. It is a practical story of the problem, written clearly enough that another technician could step in and continue the work without guessing. That means the ticket should identify what the user noticed, when the issue started, how the issue affects the user or business process, what system or device is involved, and what troubleshooting has already been attempted. A useful ticket also separates observed facts from assumptions. If a laptop will not power on after a fall, that is very different from declaring that the motherboard failed before anyone has tested the charger, battery, or power button behavior. The ticket should also capture the current status of the issue and the next expected action, because support work often involves pauses, escalations, parts ordering, user follow-up, or handoff between teams. When those details are missing, the next person inherits confusion rather than progress. A well-written ticket gives the team continuity, and continuity is one of the quiet foundations of reliable support. Weak tickets create problems that spread farther than many beginners realize. A vague note that says a printer is broken or email not working might be technically related to a real incident, but it does almost nothing to help the next technician understand urgency, scope, or possible cause. Does the printer fail for one person or for an entire department? Is email failing on one phone, on one laptop, or across the whole organization? Has the issue been present for 10 minutes or 10 days? Good ticket writing forces useful thinking because it pushes the technician to observe carefully, ask better questions, and record only what matters. It also protects the team from memory drift, where details change in conversation as time passes. Another important part of ticket quality is tone. Tickets should be factual, professional, and neutral rather than emotional or blaming. A record that focuses on what was observed, what was attempted, what was confirmed, and what still needs attention helps everyone. A record full of frustration, assumptions, or incomplete notes makes later support slower and less trustworthy. Asset records are just as important because support does not happen in a vacuum. Every device has a history, an owner or assigned user, a location, a model, a serial number, a purchase date, a warranty status, and often a life cycle stage that affects how the team should respond. A laptop that is new and covered by warranty may be handled very differently from an old system that is already scheduled for replacement. A mobile device assigned to an executive or to a traveling employee may have different urgency and security implications than a spare device sitting in storage. When asset records are accurate, technicians can make better decisions faster. They know whether a replacement part makes sense, whether a vendor should be contacted, whether a known model has a recurring weakness, and whether the device has had similar trouble before. Asset records also support inventory control and accountability. If a device moves from one user to another or disappears during a relocation, poor records turn a manageable issue into a guessing game. Good asset management makes support work more precise and less dependent on memory. The connection between tickets and asset records is where a lot of real operational value appears. A ticket explains the event that is happening now, while an asset record explains the broader identity and history of the device involved. When those two records support each other, a support team can see patterns that are impossible to recognize from one isolated incident. Imagine several tickets about battery swelling, keyboard failures, or wireless instability tied to the same model line. That pattern may reveal a defect, a purchasing problem, or a maintenance issue that deserves a bigger response than one-off troubleshooting. In the same way, repeated tickets tied to one specific laptop might show rough handling, an environmental issue, or a user workflow that puts unusual stress on the device. Asset records also help the team track replacements and confirm whether a device should be repaired, retired, or reassigned. Without that linkage, tickets become scattered stories and assets become static entries. When the two are connected, the organization gains visibility into both immediate support needs and long-term operational trends. SOPs help support teams turn repeated work into consistent work. At their best, they are not stiff scripts that remove all judgment from the technician. Instead, they are agreed ways of handling common tasks so that quality does not swing wildly depending on who performs the job. A good SOP can define the purpose of a process, explain when it applies, describe the expected checks before and after the task, identify decision points, and show where escalation is needed. This matters because support teams deal with many recurring activities, such as onboarding devices, retiring equipment, handling basic software issues, documenting replacements, or processing simple service requests. If every technician performs those tasks in a different order or forgets different details, the team becomes inconsistent and error-prone. SOPs reduce that variation. They protect the user experience, they reduce preventable mistakes, and they make training easier because new staff can learn a shared approach instead of trying to decode every experienced technician's personal habits. For an SOP to be useful, it has to be written for the real audience and the real work. That means clear language, a clear scope, and enough detail to guide action without burying the reader in unnecessary complexity. A beginner should be able to understand what the procedure is for, what conditions must be true before starting, what checks matter during the task, what signals require stopping or escalating, and what records must be updated afterward. An SOP that is too short can be dangerous because it leaves major decisions undefined. One that is too long can also fail because technicians will stop trusting it and begin skipping parts of it. Good teams review and refine SOPs after actual experience. If a problem keeps appearing, if a handoff keeps failing, or if a safety or compliance issue keeps getting missed, that is often a sign that the procedure needs improvement. In that way, SOPs are living operational tools, not static documents that exist only to sit in a folder and look official. SLAs add another important layer because support is not only about technical correctness. It is also about expectations, timing, and fairness. An SLA defines how quickly a team is expected to respond to certain kinds of issues, and, in some cases, how quickly those issues should be resolved or escalated. This helps everyone understand priorities. A widespread outage affecting many users should not be treated the same way as a minor issue affecting one person's secondary device, even though both matter. SLA thinking helps a team separate urgency from annoyance and impact from volume. It also protects technicians from random priority changes driven only by whoever is shouting the loudest. For the user, A clear expectation is often as important as the fix itself. People usually handle technical trouble better when they know what will happen next and when they can expect an update. SLA awareness turns support from reactive improvisation into managed service, where response is guided by agreed standards rather than constant emotional pressure. Knowledge articles are where a support organization begins to convert repeated effort into reusable wisdom. A ticket captures one case. An asset record captures one device or resource. An SOP captures a standard process. A knowledge article usually sits somewhere between those ideas by explaining a known issue, a common symptom pattern, a frequent question, or a reliable workaround in a form that others can quickly reuse. Good knowledge articles save time because they allow technicians to benefit from earlier troubleshooting instead of rediscovering the same answer over and over. They can also improve consistency, especially for common problems that appear across shifts, locations, or teams. A helpful article usually explains the symptom, the likely cause or causes, the scope of affected users or devices, any important cautions, and the approved path for handling the issue. It should be written clearly enough that the reader can quickly decide whether the article applies. The best articles are not giant dumps of every thought someone had during troubleshooting. They are focused, readable, and practical. One of the most important habits a beginner can develop is knowing when to turn solved work into lasting documentation. Not every ticket deserves a new knowledge article, but repeated issues, confusing fixes, and high-impact problems usually do. If a technician solves the same login problem 4 times in 2 weeks, that is a signal that the answer should no longer live only in memory or in buried ticket notes. The same is true when a workaround must be used carefully, when a symptom often gets misdiagnosed, or when the support team has learned a more efficient way to handle a recurring request. Writing the article is only part of the job. It also needs to be findable, current, and easy to understand. A knowledge base filled with outdated or poorly named articles can become as frustrating as having no documentation at all. That is why good support teams treat knowledge quality as an operational responsibility. They review older content, retire weak articles, and improve titles and summaries so the right answer can be found when time is short. The real strength of a mature support operation appears when tickets, asset records, SOPs, SLAs, and knowledge articles work together instead of existing as separate islands. A ticket may reveal an issue. The asset record may show that the affected device is part of a known pattern or a specific lifecycle stage. A knowledge article may explain the most effective response. An SOP may define the approved process for handling the request safely and consistently. The SLA may guide urgency, communication, and escalation timing. When all of those pieces connect, the technician is not just solving one isolated problem. The technician is working inside a system that supports good decisions. This is what reduces repeated mistakes. The team stops reinventing routine work, stops losing context during handoffs, and stops relying so heavily on individual memory. Instead, the organization builds a dependable structure where information flows forward. That kind of structure helps not only experienced staff, but especially new technicians who need guidance they can trust while learning the environment. There are several common misconceptions that cause documentation quality to decline. One is the belief that only the final fix matters, when in reality the observations, failed attempts, decision points, and user impact can be just as valuable for future work. Another is the idea that documenting carefully takes too much time, even though poor documentation usually costs far more time later through repeated questions, duplicate effort, and unnecessary escalation. Some technicians also fall into the habit of copying old notes without checking whether the details still apply. That creates dangerous records because outdated information can spread quickly when people trust familiar documents more than fresh observation. Another mistake is writing records for oneself instead of for the next reader. The future reader may be tired, new to the team, or stepping into the issue halfway through a busy shift. Good documentation respects that reality. It avoids unnecessary slang, vague shortcuts, and blame. It gives the next person enough context to continue intelligently rather than forcing them to guess what the previous technician meant. There is also a professional side to this topic that goes beyond efficiency. Good records support accountability, training, continuity, and trust. Managers rely on tickets and timing data to understand demand and staffing pressure. Security and compliance teams may need records to understand what happened during an incident, what device was involved, or whether required processes were followed. New technicians learn faster when they can read strong examples of real support work instead of depending entirely on verbal explanations. Even users benefit indirectly because better documentation usually means fewer repeat questions, fewer avoidable delays, and less need to explain the same problem again and again. For a beginner, it helps to think of every good ticket and every useful article as a message to your future team. You are telling them what you saw, what mattered, what worked, and what should not be forgotten. That mindset changes documentation from a boring task into a practical form of support craftsmanship, where the quality of your records becomes part of the quality of your technical work. By the end of this topic, the main idea to carry forward is simple but important. Support work becomes more valuable when it leaves behind clarity instead of just closure. Tickets preserve the story of the issue. Asset records preserve the identity and history of the device. SOPs preserve consistent process. SLAs preserve expectations and priority discipline. And knowledge articles preserve lessons that should not have to be learned twice. None of those records replace technical skill, but all of them make technical skill more effective over time. They help teams avoid repeated mistakes, reduce confusion during handoffs, train new staff more quickly, and give users a steadier experience even when problems are difficult. A strong support organization is not only one that fixes things. It is one that remembers, learns, and improves. When you begin to see documentation as part of the repair itself rather than as paperwork after the repair, you start thinking like a technician who helps the whole operation get better with every problem solved.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.